The year is 1991. Kuwait. Smoke rises from burning oil fields as a column of Soviet-made T-72 tanks retreats across the desert. These are Iraq's elite armored units, the same tanks that rolled through Iran with impunity. Suddenly, a strange sound cuts through the air, not the whistle of incoming missiles. Something different, a deep guttural roar that seems to tear the sky itself apart. Then the tanks start dying. What you're about to see was hidden for decades. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to Cold War Black Files. Not from above, where air-to-ground missiles would strike. The damage is coming from a different angle entirely. Holes appear in the top of the turrets, punching straight through steel that was designed to withstand anti-tank rounds. The armor doesn't just penetrate, it shreds, tears, disintegrates. In seconds, millions of dollars of Soviet engineering become smoking scrap metal. Soviet military advisors examining the wreckage are stunned. The penetration patterns make no sense. The entry wounds are too large for conventional cannons, too precise for rockets. Intelligence reports flooding back to Moscow describe something they've never encountered before. A weapon that fires so fast the individual shots blur into a continuous stream of destruction. American pilots are calling it the Warthog. But what the Soviets are really afraid of is the gun. To understand why this weapon terrified the Red Army, we need to go back 20 years earlier to a Pentagon conference room where American military planners faced an impossible problem. It's 1970. The Cold War is at its peak. NATO intelligence estimates that if the Soviet Union invades Western Europe, they'll come with tanks, thousands of them. The Fulda Gap in Germany, the most likely invasion route, could see waves of T-62s and the newer T-72s pouring through. American forces would be outnumbered 5-1, maybe 10-1. Traditional air support, dropping bombs from high altitude, isn't accurate enough. Missiles are expensive and complex. By the time you've destroyed 100 tanks, the next 1,000 have already broken through your lines. The Air Force needs something different, something that can fly low, survive ground fire, and kill tanks faster than the Soviets can replace them. They need a gun, not just any gun. A gun that can punch through the top armor of a tank from a moving aircraft. A gun that fires so many rounds per second that even if you miss with half of them, the other half still destroys the target. The problem is that no such gun exists. The Pentagon puts out a request: design a cannon that can be mounted on an aircraft and destroy main battle tanks. The specifications seem impossible. It needs to fire armor-piercing rounds larger than anything currently in the air. It needs a rate of fire high enough to guarantee hits on a target you're only over for a few seconds. And it needs to be reliable enough that it won't jam when a pilot's life depends on it. General Electric takes the challenge. Their engineers start with a simple question. What actually kills a tank? Not the size of the round, not the explosive. Velocity, kinetic energy. If you can fire a dense projectile fast enough, it'll punch through anything. The problem is generating that velocity from an aircraft moving at 300 miles per hour, dealing with vibration, wind resistance, and the recoil that comes from firing rounds the size of milk bottles. They go back to a design principle that's been around since the Civil War. The Gatling gun, multiple rotating barrels that cycle through firing, extraction, and loading. This spreads the heat and stress across the mechanism, but they need to scale it up, way up. They start testing barrels, 7 of them, rotating at incredible speeds. Each barrel fires, ejects the spent casing, loads a new round, all while spinning. The engineering required to make this work is staggering. The timing has to be perfect. off by a fraction of a second, and the entire mechanism tears itself apart. Then comes the ammunition. Standard cannon rounds won't cut it. They need something that can defeat Soviet armor, which is specifically designed to resist Western weapons. The engineers choose depleted uranium. It's dense, incredibly dense. When a depleted uranium round hits steel armor at high velocity, it doesn't just penetrate, it sharpens itself on impact, creating a self-sharpening penetrator that cuts through metal like it's paper. And it's pyrophoric. On impact, it ignites, turning the inside of a tank into an inferno. Each round weighs nearly a pound. The complete cartridge, including the propellant, is over a foot long. The gun that fires these rounds is 19 feet from end to end and weighs over 4,000 pounds. It's not a gun that fits on a plane. It's a gun you build a plane around. This is the GAU-8 Avenger. And it's unlike anything that's ever flown before. The first test firing nearly destroys the test platform. The recoil is so violent that it threatens to stall the aircraft. Engineers have to completely redesign the mounting system, adding hydraulic dampeners and offsetting the barrel to counteract the rotational force. When the gun fires, it produces more thrust than one of the aircraft's engines. If you fired it long enough, the recoil would literally push the plane backward through the air. But it works. In testing, the GAU-8 fires up to 65 rounds per second, not per minute, per second. At that rate, the individual shots merge into a sound unlike anything else in warfare. Pilots describe it as a belch, a mechanical roar, the sound of metal screaming. From the ground, it sounds like the sky is being torn in half. The Air Force builds the A-10 Thunderbolt II around this gun. The aircraft is ugly, ungainly, slow compared to sleek fighters. But it's designed for one purpose: to survive long enough to bring that gun to bear on Soviet armor. The cockpit is surrounded by a titanium bathtub that can withstand direct hits from anti-aircraft fire. The engines are positioned high and to the rear, shielded from ground fire. The aircraft can lose one engine, half a wing, and most of its tail and still fly home. And mounted in the nose, offset slightly to the left so the firing barrel aligns with the center line, is the GAU-8. For years, the Soviets know the A-10 exists. They've seen the intelligence photos, but they don't fully understand what they're looking at. The gun is so large, so disproportionate to the aircraft, that Soviet analysts initially think the photos are doctored. Surely the Americans haven't actually built an entire aircraft around a single gun. That would be insane, inefficient, a waste of resources. They're about to find out just how wrong they are. Fast forward to 1991. Desert Storm. The first time the A-10 flies in major combat operations against Soviet-equipped forces. Iraqi tank commanders have been trained by Soviet advisors. They know how to defend against American air power. Spread out, use terrain, keep moving. Anti-aircraft batteries create overlapping fields of fire. On paper, the defenses should hold. Then the Warthogs arrive. They come in low, so low that tank crews can see the pilots. The aircraft seem almost leisurely, cruising at speeds that would be suicidal for any other combat jet. Anti-aircraft fire fills the air. The A-10s ignore it. Rounds that would down any other aircraft punch through wings and fuselage, and the Warthogs keep flying. They line up on the tanks, and then the sound starts. That roar, like industrial machinery chewing through metal. Each burst lasts only 2 or 3 seconds, but in that time, 70 to 200 rounds of depleted uranium scream downward at nearly 3,000 feet per second. The rounds don't need to hit the side armor or the front glacis. the thickest parts of the tank. The A-10 attacks from above, where the armor is thinnest, designed to protect against artillery fragments, not armor-piercing penetrators moving at supersonic speeds. The depleted uranium rounds punch through. Inside the tank, the effect is catastrophic. The penetrators don't just make holes, they fragment, creating shrapnel that ricochets through the crew compartment. The pyrophoric uranium ignites stored ammunition. Fuel tanks rupture and explode. Tanks don't just stop, they cook off, their ammunition exploding in chain reactions that blow the turrets 20 feet into the air. Iraqi tank crews begin abandoning their vehicles at the sound of the A-10's approach. Not when they see it, when they hear it. Because by the time you see the A-10, it's already firing. Soviet military observers are embedded with Iraqi forces. They watch their tanks, the pride of Soviet engineering, being destroyed in numbers that seem impossible. Intelligence reports flow back to Moscow. The Americans have deployed a weapon system specifically designed to kill Soviet armor in massive quantities. And it works. In the first days of Desert Storm, A-10s destroy more tanks than the rest of the coalition air forces combined. But there's something the reports don't fully convey, something that only becomes clear when Soviet engineers examine the wreckage. The precision. Every tank shows the same pattern. Holes punched through the top armor, concentrated in the engine compartment or near the ammunition storage. The American pilots aren't just shooting at tanks. They're targeting specific parts of tanks, aiming for kill shots. This is what terrifies Moscow. Not just that the weapon exists, but that American pilots have become so proficient with it. The GAU-8 is difficult to use. You're flying at 300 miles per hour, 20 feet off the ground, pulling Gs as you line up the shot. You have seconds to acquire the target, adjust for movement, and fire. Miss, and you've wasted ammunition and given away your position. But the A-10 pilots aren't missing. They've trained for this. Thousands of hours practicing the gun run, the approach angle, the dive, the moment to open fire. They know the ballistics of the GAU-8 by instinct. They can judge the lead required to hit a moving tank, compensate for crosswinds, adjust their aim mid-burst. The gun doesn't just destroy tanks. In the hands of a skilled pilot, it's surgical. Soviet planners begin running simulations. If NATO and the Warsaw Pact go to war, how long before A-10s blunt a tank offensive? The numbers are grim. A single A-10 carries enough ammunition for multiple gun runs. Each run can destroy or disable multiple tanks. A squadron of Warthogs could shred an armored battalion in minutes. And the A-10 is nearly impossible to shoot down with anything short of a dedicated surface-to-air missile. Even then, the aircraft's survivability is legendary. There are documented cases of A-10s returning to base with half their wing missing, hydraulics destroyed, one engine out. And the gun still works. The psychological impact is just as devastating as the physical. Tank crews, knowing that somewhere above them, an A-10 might be circling, waiting, watching through targeting pods that can spot a tank from miles away. And when it comes, there's no defense. You can't outrun it. You can't armor against it. You can only hope the pilot chooses a different target. After the Gulf War, military analysts study the wreckage. They find T-72s with entry wounds grouped in patterns smaller than a dinner plate. At the speeds and altitudes the A-10 operates, this level of accuracy shouldn't be possible. But it is, because the GAU-8 isn't just about volume of fire. It's about putting that volume exactly where it needs to go. The Soviet Union collapses in 1991, just months after Desert Storm. But the fear of the Warthog's gun lives on. Russian military doctrine evolves. New emphasis on mobile air defense. Tactics designed specifically to counter low-flying ground attack aircraft, all because of a gun that seemed impossible. A gun that turned the battlefield calculus upside down. And here's the thing that still amazes engineers and terrifies military planners. The GAU-8 Avenger was designed in the 1970s, with slide rules and early computers, using manufacturing techniques that are primitive by today's standards. And it still works. A-10s are still flying, still carrying that massive gun, still capable of shredding modern armor. Because sometimes, the simplest solution is the best one. You want to stop a tank? Hit it very hard, very fast, very many times. The GAU-8 does exactly that. 19 feet of rotating barrels and mechanical precision, firing depleted uranium rounds that defeat armor through pure kinetic energy. No fancy electronics, no guidance systems, just physics. Mass times velocity equals dead tank. That sound, the one that terrified Iraqi tank crews and baffled Soviet intelligence, still echoes over training ranges today. The sound of the sky tearing apart, the roar of the Warthog's gun. A weapon so effective, so perfectly designed for its purpose, that 70 years after the concept was born, nobody's found a better way to kill a tank from the air. The Phantom weapon wasn't a mystery. It was just impossible to believe, until the tanks started burning.